Hey, y'all, and welcome to the podcast for the World Builders, where we dive into the spells and strategies for Black feminist world building and creative actualization. The weekly podcasts and newsletters are presented by Seeda School and yours truly. And Seeda School is like where all this theory meets practice. All the theory that we're going to be talking about today, we actually practice it inside of Seeda School. And I am so honored to be learning and practicing alongside you today and always. If this is your first episode, thank you for tuning in. And if you are returning, as always, thank you for coming back. All right, y'all. You know about our little podcast ritual by now if you are returning. And before diving in, right, we always ground here inside the present moment. So if you are walking, let's direct our attention to each intentional step. If you are cooking, let's direct our attention to each chop, each stir, or the sounds of sizzling. If you're commuting in a car, notice your breath. If you're commuting on a train, notice your heartbeat and imagine the collective rhythm you're sharing with your fellow passengers. Let's slow down time and drop in together here. I'm going to take 3 deep breaths, deep, full belly breaths, right? And invite you to do the same with me, alongside me, if that feels possible in this very moment. All right, let's begin. Do 2 more. Mm. Now, with that little pocket of pause, right? Let's note one thing that we picked up from our sensorium. Something that maybe we could see, touch, taste, smell, hear, something that we were able to possibly feel beyond the senses we even have language for. Let's check in, right? Something that I can smell right now is my incense burning in the background. I can taste like the turmeric ginger on my tongue from this tea that I'm drinking. And I can also see the like I kind of have like a light in front of me. I have a slightly different setup because I am experimenting with actually like recording these video on so that I can share them on social media uh just so we can kind of bring kind of widen, right, the community of folks who are listening to this podcast. I hinted in previous episodes that I'm feeling called to be a little bit more visible. So this is that experiment, and I can actually see it playing out with a difference in setup. And you may see those videos on social media in the coming weeks. But what's going on in your sensorium? Let's check in. Maybe something you were able to hear, see, smell, taste in this very moment. And then we also start by checking in with our mood and intention, right? What is that in this very moment? My mood is personally like my mood is open. I'm feeling a little less critical. I have like self-critical, like critical of the other side, right? I've been getting all these messages and directions, and I've been a little less like, oh, you missed a spot, or there's a typo there, or there's a misprint here, right? You know how, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm like this when you get word from your ancestors and you're like, no, 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 no. baby, you don't have all the information, right? Let me help you out. I'm actually supposed to go left instead of right, right? And admittedly, spiritual practice is usually, admittedly, my spiritual practice, I will speak from the I, is usually one of critical collaboration. I can be critical, right? But lately, I've been like, you got it. All right, we're going left instead of right. Let's go. My mood is loosening the grip on the wheel, releasing control. Not a mood of being passive, but maybe more of a mood of being accepting, right? This is a mood of acceptance. And it feels good here. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. It feels good here. So what is your mood? How are you arriving? Right? Let's pause and check in on that. No judgment, right? Ever. And what about your intention, right? My intention is to share my journey of transformation as coherently as possible in this episode. And I say as possible because inside Seeda School, we value incoherence, right? We clamor for the right to opacity for everyone, as Edward Glissant would invite us into, right? We love abstraction. We love nonlinearity. We honor and respect um, all of those ways of being and showing up. But for the sake of this episode, I will be attempting to break down the story into a linear beginning, middle, and end. There will be times where I fail at this, and the story will feel windy and hard to follow, but my intention is that the glimmers of insight from inside my journey of transformation helps illuminate the wisdom and skills waiting to be picked up and shared inside yours, right? A journey that is yours alone. And that's my intention behind recording this episode. What's your intention behind listening to this episode, right? We do nothing without intention. So I'm going to pause here and allow you to reflect on that before we dive in. All right, now that we've checked in, we've grounded inside our sensorium, let's dive into episode 59, offering the wisdom and skills from your journey of transformation. Last week, we talked about how the journey is the dream and the destination is the practice through the metaphor of teaching and learning. I want to pick that thread back up. Just as I believe creativity is the spiritual disposition of our species, I want to argue curiosity, teaching, learning are organic ways or are like organic or natural, right, to our ways of being as well, right? So organic that the debate of nature versus nurture has been going on for centuries now. Today, in this episode, I'm less interested in teasing out the difference between the gifts we're taught, right, versus the gifts we're born with. And what I'm more interested in is teasing out what happened to us. For us to arrive right here, right now, sharing this exact moment in time. Right? What terrible, why me? Thank God it was me. I can't believe it was me. Why did you have to go? Heartbreaking, world ending, and world mending. Thing that we thought for sure might take us out the game, but didn't. A tide of life. We had no tools to survive, so we invented the surfboard in the eye of the wave. It's that. Yes, that. I want to talk about that today. Right? The people, prayers, and places you had to invent to make it here. The world you had to retreat to, the world you had to run toward to pull yourself across time to this exact moment. To this exact moment where I don't need to tell you how powerful you are. But what I would love to do is point you to the evidence so you can remember for yourself. I want to reflect on a season of deep grief, surrender, or uncertainty, right? Let's grace that moment of time in your mind, like running a feather over it with the lightest touch, right? Gentle touch. Now I want you to think of the multitude of creative acts, choices, decisions, risks, right? You had to invent, to deploy, allow to make it to this moment. All right, y'all, we couldn't even count the number of creative acts if we tried. Hundreds, thousands of decisions, intuitive insights, micro moves, right? Creating a well of wisdom you can draw from at any time. You've turned worry like into water. You've turned despair into desire. And my question today is, will you offer us a sip? Right? See, I have this funny little feeling, that compelled me to create a school, and it is this. Perhaps the best way for every single one of us to like serve each other is by learning from inside our journey of transformation. Then teaching from inside the lessons we learned and earned. Right? Offering the seeds of wisdom and exchanging the skills that we gathered along the way. On the days where it feels like my legs aren't moving at the speed of my visions, we talked about this in last episode, right? The days when I can kind of get a little bit frustrated with the speed at which my body will allow me to work. I remember all the work I've done that is hard to see. Work that is hard to see, making it easy to forget. All right, so what is my journey of transformation? Again, did all this preamble to kind of like bring us to the same spot together, right? The same moment in time where we are reflecting on kind of like this seat of wisdom that we're already kind of grounded in, already resting in, maybe unaware of its support, right? So what's my journey of transformation and what brought me here to this work, to this episode? There are as I've said, an infinite amount of moments I can draw narrative lines around, right? A multitude of places that I can carve out a beginning and end in the landscape of time. And in the world building workshop, if you've been to one, I rewind the time back to 2019. Back when I had a full-time job as a software engineering instructor at a coding bootcamp. Back when, right, I was working through meals. Back when I would stay at work way past what my body could bear. Back when I didn't even know what a boundary was. A boundary, what's that? And all these micro moments where I not only denied my creative practice, but denied myself. Right? And this spiritual and somatic disregard showed up as the belief that work didn't need to feel good in order to do it. In fact, I was in an unconscious habit of connecting my efficacy to my level of self-sacrifice, y'all. I began to notice when I assumed postures of overextension, I would receive the most praise. Praise that would make me feel good at my job. And the toxic cycle of external validation and outsourcing my worth inside my work would continue like clockwork. And this toxic cycle played out in my 9-to-5 job as an educator, right? But we can see this capitalist choreography rehearsed inside academia, nonprofits, and organizing spaces as well. It turns out white supremacy culture actually doesn't care about the mission statements plastered on the wall of the office or posted on the company website. Far too often, what happens is the behavior that gets rewarded is the behavior that replicates. Right? This is the journey of transformation. Or this is the journey, I should say, that transformed me. Coming into that awareness, right? Coming into awareness that I wanted nothing to do with the reward system of white supremacy, right? That I wouldn't survive the climb to that mountaintop. That I was not interested in getting promoted inside a culture of disembodiment and the denial of one's needs. That I could not stomach workplaces that say they want to change the world, but tell you to leave your politics at the door. I was teaching on one of the campuses in Brooklyn, whose entire mission was increasing access to careers in tech. Students couldn't even apply if they made over $40,000 a year. So imagine this. My team and I are helping some students go from making $30,000 a year to getting six-figure job offers in less than a year. There's so many stories from this time period, y'all. But there were times I paid for students' lunches because they were fully prepared to skip meals during the day. And not just for financial reasons, but because the stakes felt that high. Of course, we told them to take breaks, but their nervous systems wouldn't allow it. Students working through lunch was a common occurrence, and most of the time, I would be right there with them. Everyone felt how high the stakes were, and there was no room, time, space, capacity to honor any diverging or individual needs if it was outside the mission of the program, which was teaching you how to code and getting you a job. Right? And we could say my journey of transformation started when I took this job and perhaps climaxed when I realized we were teaching students how to code, but not how to decode the systems of oppression that might be underneath this career craving. Right? The somatic inability to take a lunch break. Now, whenever I tell this story, I want to be abundantly clear. There is nothing wrong with wanting a career pivot. And there is certainly nothing wrong with wanting to make more money if you are making $40,000 a year in New York City. But as I played the token Black girl getting shuttled to Black high schools and youth STEM programs, I started to realize a common theme. Everyone wants to teach Black and brown kids how to code, and no one wants to teach them how to dream, how to fight, how to be pissed off, how to demand more than the scripts that were handed to them, how to imagine otherwise. I was 25 when I took the job, and in the beginning, I truly believed in the mission of the program. I truly believed increasing access to tech careers would change lives, families, and neighborhoods, and I'm sure it did. But as it goes, I was the teacher and the students were teaching me, right? A classic marker of neoliberalism And white supremacy culture is individualism, right? And I saw that play out on campus, and I kind of like felt that tension inside the classroom, right? White supremacy culture is a culture that says making under $40,000 in a city where that salary is barely survivable is your problem. And it's a problem you could solve if you just skilled up, if you just put in the hours, if you just worked a little harder. The problem is you, says neoliberalism. It's you, not the 360 patriarchal oppression, not the suffocating nature of racial capitalism, not the ticking time bomb of ecological crisis that feels immobilizing, not the grating realities of a ableist culture, not the havoc walking past the police wrecks on your nervous system every day, not the fact that your elders are suffering from premature and painful deaths because they can't access the healthcare they need, not the fact that all this anger and grief sometimes makes you feel like a ball of fire chained to a boulder at the ankle. Not the fact that you can't slow down for long enough to feel any of it. No, the problem is you. Your problem is you don't earn enough. And if you would just try harder, you might earn that respite you're so desperate for. So here is this tech job. You know you want it. All you have to do is try a little harder to numb yourself to feeling anything at all, except the goals we've laid out in the promised land we're pointing you towards. Y'all, I could no longer be inside that dynamic with my students. My journey of transformation started when I took the job in Climax, when I realized divestment from white supremacy culture is really what all our bodies were craving. I was there for 2 years, and I left my job in 2020. This is what it always boils down to, right? That decision that gets forced on us inside cultures dominated by colonial choreographies. A decision that we all must make at some point. And here it is. This is the option they lay out for us. Either ignore the needs of your body and get rewarded, or make the risky move and dare to feel something without any guarantees. Dare to acknowledge your trauma, dare to acknowledge your grief, dare to acknowledge your anger, dare to acknowledge your disability, dare to acknowledge your interdependence. And you will be thrusted into the precarity of outdoors. We will kick you out. I don't know about you, but this is what it felt like when I dared to want more inside systems that weren't designed for me to want anything that felt like breath or belonging. And Toni Morrison has this passage in The Bluest Eye that I cannot stop thinking about. It's a little long, but I feel like I must read it here. All right. Listen, I have no free will in the matter. I must. Here it is. She goes. There is a difference between being put out and being put outdoors. If you are put out, you go somewhere else. If you are outdoors, there is no place to go. The distinction was subtle but final. Outdoors was the end of something, an irrevocable physical fact, defining and complementing our metaphysical condition. Being a minority in both caste and class, we moved about in a way on the hem of life, struggling to consolidate our weaknesses and hang on, or to creep up singly up into the major folds of the garment. Our perpetual existence, however, was something we had learned to deal with, probably because it was abstract. But the concreteness of being outdoors was another matter. Like the difference between the concept of death and being, in fact, dead. Dead doesn't change, and the outdoors is here to stay. I put the full passage in the show notes, but I can't stop thinking about it because I can't shake the fact that she's naming what it might feel like to venture outside the doors of whiteness and all the promises of safety and certainty it makes. She's naming the terror, the uncertainty, the wild, wild metaphysical condition of outdoors. A condition that once you experience it, you can't go back. The self you knew must die and be grieved because outdoors is here to stay. This was my experience anyway. And maybe you share this experience too, that moment when, as soon as we dare to feel, instead of suppressing feeling, we're kicked out into this wild unknown that we don't have any tools to navigate, because from grade school to college or from grade school to our jobs, we were all taught, kind of all we practiced was domination over the needs of our bodies, our spirits, our deep, boundless love for each other. This is what I know. Just like we practice our art, our craft, our skills, we can also practice domination over every desire arising inside our inner worlds and push it back down for fear of getting kicked outdoors. J. Cameron Carter and Sarah Jane Cervenak have done tons of scholarship on this and have curated an assembly of books in a series called Black Outdoors: Innovations in the Poetics of Study, which continues to theorize, right, about the existential dilemmas and binds of honoring our erotic wildness, right, and desires, creative desires inside racial capitalism. I'll also link that series in the show notes. And this series also invokes what Ruth Wilson Gilmore and Robin D.G. Kelley helps us remember, right? Which is, you can't talk about capitalism without talking about race. Again, I could have drawn the lines of beginning, middle, and end in an infinite amount of places. But if my journey of transformation started when I took my previous job in 2018, climaxed when I realized the problem was less about the individual and more about systems of oppression and a lack of curriculum that names this, then one could say the journey reaches its conclusion when I move back to family and ancestral land in Dawn, Virginia, to recover from a culture of domination and learn to breathe again. And I say move back because I never lived there, but I spent my entire childhood there. And I remember it being this place where a wild kind of permissive freedom felt possible because of the blanket, the flanking of family, the 360 degrees of mutual aid and support that could be felt inside Dawn, Virginia, what they call Duval Town, where literally every single house is someone you know lives there. You can go to almost any house within a 5, maybe 2-mile radius, right? And ask for a plate and they will feed you. Right. So my journey of transformation has taken me through the wild, wild forest of my desire. And like I said, I literally had to move to the woods to feel safe enough to access it. And I know this is a privilege to be able to lean on family when you need your rent to be less than four figures, just for a little bit, if only to get a couple months, a few seasons, a year, right? To have the audacity to feel all the things that were done to you, all the things that were done to us. And then to have the nerve to try to use your creative skills to do something about it. I know it is a privilege. And now the question is, what do you do with that privilege? Right? As we alluded to in the last episode, our journey of transformation can be a teacher, a place where we practice and access decolonial forms of healing, interspecies homecomings, and ancestral methodologies of remembrance that reconnect us to ourselves before the indoctrination of white supremacy, right? It's a reconnection. It wasn't always our truth, right? This indoctrination of the colonial imaginary. And if, like, listen, if you haven't allowed yourself to feel any of this or to feel kind of like the grief of what this system does to us, all this might sound melodramatic and alarmist. But if your journey of transformation thrusted you outdoors, where you had to invent cartographic tools, maps, and methods of creating new clearings, new worlds, new possibilities, then you know what I'm talking about. Let us start here in the outdoors with our tools, maps, and new navigational skills. How might you offer them up so others can find their way? What have you learned from your journey of transformation? What, right, is that the key? Is perhaps that the key to unlocking how you might be of service inside your creative life of refusal, as Alexis Pauline Gumbs calls it? From 2018 to 2021, my journey of transformation taught me I am worthy of my desires. My pleasure is not a safety hazard, and I can survive outside the culture and imagination of white supremacy. Right? These are the basics. These are just core basic truths, but it never ceases to startle me how easy these truths are to forget and how hard they are to practice in everyday life. On the other side of this journey, I created a school for sharing all the tools, frameworks, processes, and resources I use to imagine, believe, and practice all the above. And a school animated by the belief that teachers, guides, authors, artists, organizers really do have the power to extend our imaginations beyond the colonial order if we would just insist on serving up a more truthful curriculum that remembers to quote unquote leave politics out of it is always already a political choice. I told my story through the linear chain of beginning, middle, and end, but the truth is this work is ongoing. The journey is the dream, right? The practice is the transformation. That's our work. Y'all, we can survive outside the colonial imagination if we just agreed to meet each other there, where we meet each other there. I mentioned I also share parts of this story and invite you to reflect on your own journey of transformation inside Seeda School's World Building Workshop. And this is where we're moving to the invitation portion of the podcast, because I'd love if you could join us. Keep talking about the World Building Workshop. What is the World Building Workshop? Well, first of all, you can learn more about it and register via the series or via the link in the show notes. And it's a World Building Workshop series. There's part 1 and part 2, right? The first one kicks off on October 8th, and it is all about seeding a world rooted in the truth of your desire, right? It's not a figment of your imagination. You are not losing it for wanting what you want. Your needs met. Time for your creative practice. Time and space to spend with your family, right? Time and space to go on walks, long, long, long walks. Time and space to do absolutely nothing. There is truth to that desire, and they are all completely, completely valid. So that's what we talk about in the first workshop. We get to the bottom of that. And then in the second workshop, that one is about resourcing, right? The worlds of your desire based on the truth of your needs. So in the second one, we are talking about our shared resource money. So registration is free, and it gets you access to the link to join us for both. So check out the show notes for that. And y'all, I crafted a framework using the seed data, and the framework is also something I share in the World Building Workshop. But I crafted a framework using the seed data from my journey of transformation. And inside of Seeda School, I will teach you how to do the same. And we will do it together, right? Inside a cohort of world builders, we will create a framework, a map of the journey that you will guide others through. You will look at those seasons of surrender or periods of grief where uncertainty revealed and reminded you of your potent creative power, reminded you of the potency of our love, of your love, reminded you of the potency of your values, your commitments to yourself and each other, to all of us, right? And it is from inside this ongoing journey of transformation that I believe we are called to serve. It is from here that we are reminded of our creativity, which reminds us of our power. And it is from here we are reminded of how we are forever, right? In this dynamic of simultaneously being guides and learners. So if you're interested in translating your journey of transformation into a story, a framework, and an offering to invite others inside of, then register for the upcoming World Building Workshop series, which kicks off again on October 8th at noon Eastern Standard Time. And registration is free. So everything's in the show notes if you want to learn more. And I would love to see you there. But either way, I am so, so happy you are here with us right here, right now inside this episode. And I am so happy your journey brought you here to this episode with us. For real. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the podcast for the World Builders, where we dive into the spells and strategies of Black feminist world building while exploring how offering the skills and wisdom from our journey of transformation might seed, resource, and deepen creative practices rooted in collective liberation. I say this every episode. I firmly believe we all came into this world creative. We all came into this world with something to offer. And deep down, we all want to orient around politics of love instead of fear. These are the beliefs we try to honor inside of Seeda School. As always, This podcast will forever be free, and the best way to support it is by sharing it with a friend or taking a screenshot or a screen recording of the episode and sharing it on social media so other world builders can find us. I mentioned I'll also be like posting videos of this recording, so feel free to share that too. But I can promise you, you will never see a Seeda School ad while scrolling the metaverse. So I am putting my faith in you and the work instead, I should say. Right? Seeda School deeply relies on word of mouth to keep the lights on. So tell a friend to tell a friend, tell an auntie to tell a cousin, to tell a hairdresser, to tell a babysitter. If you want to keep these episodes coming. I heard rating and leaving a review helps too. Second best way to support is by becoming a paid subscriber to the Seeda School Substack at $5 a month, but only if you have the financial capacity to do so. Until next week, y'all. So be it. So to it. Breathe through it.